Hello everyone, and welcome to this first video in a series of videos that I will be doing in order to discuss various political ideologies, events, and political figures. I decided to start this video series because I looked around on social media and throughout the world and all the political discourse that's going on recently with how divided the United States is, and realizing that not a lot of people understand the words that they're using. They throw it out there as if it's what they think it is. And I know this from personal experience. I've had people say a certain ideology is one thing because that's what they know and that's what it is. And that's not necessarily the right thing to do, because it just muddies the waters and it starts to make words feel meaningless. And then it, gosh knows what happens. But anyways, so the first video that I wanted to make was one on an ideology that I thought many people don't understand, but know is a bad thing, but they probably couldn't point it out if they saw it. And that would be the ideology of fascism. The term is thrown around a lot, hence the title of the video. But there is merit to people using the word fascist. It's just that people need to understand when to use the word fascist. So, as you may see on the screen, the picture right here is of a person who looks quite familiar. I promise it is not the small mustache man who everybody thinks of when they see an image like this. This is Charlie Chaplin. This is him in his movie The Great Dictator from 1940, where he makes fun of small mustache man and just makes him to look like a buffoon, which I think is a great thing. So side note, if you want a good movie, I highly recommend The Great Dictator. It is funny and Charlie Chaplin is a genius. So with that said, I went to school for political science, and in one of my courses, we talked about fascism as an ideology because it was a course on ideologies. And in our textbook, the authors claimed that there were four main elements to fascism. The first one being it was a counter to the Enlightenment. Now, what does that mean? Basically, fascism came about as a response to Enlightenment ideas. So, Enlightenment ideas, for those of you who might not know, are like what the United States is founded on. It's founded on Enlightenment ideas from the political philosopher John Locke, or the French Revolution was partly founded on Enlightenment ideas from Jean-Jacques Rousseau, or all these sorts of different things. And so fascism is a reaction to it. Fascism is inherently reactionary. So that's where the first element comes in. The second element is nationalism. And this is mainly why a lot of people have an issue with the term nationalism, because for some it can be seen as a good thing, and it can be seen as a unifier and as a force for good. And dependent on what it's being used for, it sure can. It just depends. Fascists use nationalism in a bad sense. They use it to create this superiority complex for their nation and to make it seem like their nation is the best, and that their nation can do no wrong, and that they are going about doing the right thing. And so when it comes to nationalism, that's why everybody gets a little scared about the term. The third element is elitism. So that kind of plays into what I said earlier with nationalism, but it's this idea that the strong will rule the world and the weak will not, and that if you're not strong, you're weak, and therefore you can't be as good as the rest of us. We are powerful. The strong are powerful, is what fascists would say. And that's basically that. Element number 4, and the final element, is irrationalism. Fascism is really irrational. It makes a lot of contradictions, and it doesn't make a lot of sense sometimes. Hence why, if you have a really good debater and you have or not even a really good debater, all you need is somebody who has a somewhat understanding of certain ideologies, or just somewhat understanding of the world in general. When a fascist starts arguing something, somebody with basic knowledge could easily break down some of the arguments that fascists make. And if you have a really good person who's well versed in different ideologies or knows how to debate very well, they can break apart a fascist easy as pie. So yeah, those were the 4 elements that my textbook and the authors of it said or make up fascism. Now, they're not the first ones. A man by the name of Umberto Eco, this man right here, he was born in 1930s Mussolini's Italy, or fascist Italy, under the rule of Benito Mussolini. And he grew up in the 30s, and his life, he was in his early teens when World War II ended. And he saw firsthand how Mussolini and the fascists of Italy ran the country and what it was like to live under fascism. And of course, as he went on, he studied Nazi Germany and other fascist nations. And he realized that some people kind of seemed to be forgetting what had happened during that time. And so he wrote an essay entitled Your Fascism. Here is the complete text. If you wish to read it, I am on the Anarchist Library. They have free open source pages or essays and stuff, anything to do with like anti-fascism or whatever it may be. And they have the whole text here, so you can read it yourself if you wish to read it. If you don't have time to read it, the Audible Anarchist on YouTube has somebody who's reading it to you, and you can just listen to them read it, and it's about 30 minutes or so. It's kind of nice. That's how I listened to it or read about it, because whatever. So if you are busy doing chores or at work, just pop this on and you can listen to it. Anyways, Eco came up with 14 characteristics that could be defined, or that could define what he called your fascism. Basically saying this will apply to almost every fascist ideology that comes about. Each fascist ideology has these characteristics, and we're going to go through them a little bit. So here they are. The first one is the cult of tradition. One has only to look at the syllabus of every fascist movement to find the major traditionalist thinkers. The Nazi noise was nourished by traditionalist, syncretistic, occult elements. Oh man, I am doing great with words today. Anyways, what this is saying is fascists are obsessed with cult, or with tradition. They're obsessed with tradition, and they need tradition in order to keep going. And that kind of plays into the whole, they're counter to the Enlightenment. That's where that comes in too. They don't like anything that breaks tradition. Number 2, the rejection of modernism. The Enlightenment, the age of reason, is seen as the beginning of modern depravity. In this sense, your fascism can be defined as irrationalism. So again, the Enlightenment brought about this different way of thinking, and a lot of it comes with reason. So that's why we think about, was this logical? Was there a reason behind this? Fascism rejects that notion. It sees that logical calculation as this is unjust. This is not right. This is degraded society. So that also too creates that irrationalism that I talked about earlier. Number 3, the cult of action for action's sake. Action being beautiful in itself, it must be taken before or without any previous reflection. Thinking is a form of emasculation. So basically, this is talking about how when you act, you act. You just have to act. Don't even think about it. You just go with it. Just go for it and you'll feel great. Okay? And if you don't, then you're showing your weakness. You're not good. Number 4, disagreement is treason. The critical spirit makes distinctions, and to distinguish is a sign of modernism. In modern culture, the scientific community praises disagreement as a way to improve knowledge. So here they talk about Eco talks about how treason, or not treason, disagreement is not good. You want to have that social cohesion amongst people, so that way they are easy to control. That's what kind of the fascists do, is they use that social cohesion in order to keep everybody together. And the moment you have disagreement, they see that as a bad thing that can turn everything down the wrong path. Number 5, fear of difference. The first appeal of a fascist or prematurely fascist movement is an appeal against the intruders. Thus, fascism is racist by definition. This one's pretty self-explanatory. It's just really that fascists didn't like things that are different to them. So it really depends. Is this a predominantly white country? Are there people who are not white coming in? Is that a thing? Or is this a predominantly Christian country? Are there people who are Muslim or Jewish coming in? It really depends. So they really have to have that difference in there. Number 6, appeal to social frustration. One of the most typical features of the historical fascism was the appeal to a frustrated middle class, a class suffering from an economic crisis or feelings of political humiliation, and frightened by the pressure of lower social groups. So, in times of crisis, in society, in our capitalist society, there are 3 groups. There is the upper class, middle class, and lower class, right? And a bulk of society is middle class. That's the typical, when times are going good, that's usually what it is. The bulk of everybody is the middle class. The lower class are some, upper class are some, but most of the people can be put in the middle class. However, in times of crisis, the extreme ends, so the lower class and the upper class, start to become bigger groups or have more power. The upper class might have less people, but it could have more power with their wealth. But the lower class could become more powerful because they have more people all of a sudden becoming a part of that group. And those who are left in the middle start to become scared. And so you have, a lot of the times when crises develop, you have 2 extremes that form, one on the left and one on the right, in a political sense. And the fascists try to capitalize on that, and they try to pull the middle class towards them, because the fascists are on the right, and they try to pull the middle class to the fascist cause, because they know that if they had the middle class and the upper class together, the lower class could be kept down. Number 7, the obsession with a plot. The followers must feel besieged. The easiest way to solve the plot is the appeal to xenophobia. So again, it's that fear of difference stated above, and that appeal to social frustration. So, for example, like these immigrants are coming to take your jobs, or immigrants come in and suck on the welfare of society. Those are some obsession with the plot, that all of a sudden these different people are coming in and they're doing things that they shouldn't be doing in the eyes of fascists and other people. Number 8, the enemy is both strong and weak. By a continuous shifting of rhetorical focus, the enemies are at the same time too strong and too weak. So this goes with the irrationalism too, because an enemy can't be strong and weak. It can either be strong or weak, or I guess somewhere in between, but still it would make it somewhat strong. So fascists like to do that and use that rhetoric. So one moment they'll say, this group X is everywhere and we need to watch out for them. And then a few minutes later, they'll say group X is weak and they are starving and they don't know what to do. And that's what fascism feeds off of. It needs to have that. Number 9. Pacifism is trafficking with the enemy. For your fascism, there is no struggle for life, but rather life is lived for struggle. So here, fascism constantly talks about conflict. It needs conflict. It needs to keep things moving forward. That fear of difference and the enemy needs to push that struggle forward. You're constantly struggling with your enemy, quote unquote. Number 10, contempt for the weak. elitism is a typical aspect of any reactionary ideology. Again, I kind of touched on this in my textbook definition. Number 11, everybody is educated to become a hero. In your fascist ideology, heroism is the norm. This cult of heroism is strictly linked with the cult of death. So fascists tell their followers that they can change, that they can do what needs to be done, that they can be a hero, that they can be the strong one and hold back the enemy. It feels like a death cult, like Echo says, because if you're teaching everybody that they have to hold back the enemy and that they should fight to their last breath, is a lot of times what they do. It leads to this idea that it is okay to die for this ideology. Number 12, machismo and weaponry. Machismo implies both disdain for women and intolerance and condemnation of non-standard sexual habits, from chastity to homosexuality. So this goes back to the idea of weakness in society, that there's an elite, right? Contempt for the weak. Most of the time, virtually always, fascist ideologies believe that women are the weaker sex biologically. That they are the weaker ones, and don't even get them started on transgenderism, because to them that's on a lower totem pole. Again, that goes to the non-standard sexual habits or intolerance of different categories or things. And the only true strong person in a fascist society is a male. It goes to that idea of elitism. There has to be somebody on top and there has to be somebody on the bottom for fascism to work. Number 13, selective populism. There is in our future a TV or internet populism in which the emotional response of a selected group of citizens can be presented and accepted as the voice of the people. Umberto Eco wrote this in 1995, so he didn't know how how the internet was going to progress, but he did realize that at some point in the future, the internet, or mass media with TV, but the internet would be used as a platform to really push this idea and push fascism along. And fascists who came on these platforms, such as YouTube or Twitter or Reddit or 4chan or wherever you're getting, or whatever site, they are pushing this idea that we are the voice of the people. We know what's right and we know what things should be. And their responses are emotional. They're not logical. They may come off as logical, but they are really getting at an emotional response. And finally, number 14, your fascism speaks newspeak. Newspeak is a term from the book 1984, which is really just to simplify terms in order to be used as political propaganda. Did I say 1985? 1984. That's what I meant. Okay. Number 14, your fascism speaks newspeak. All the Nazi or fascist school books made use of an impoverished vocabulary and an elementary syntax in order to limit the instruments for complex and critical reasoning. Earlier when I said anybody who has a basic understanding of many political ideologies could break down fascist arguments, this is what I mean, because fascism likes simplicity and it likes things to be simplistic. Anytime there's complex or critical reasoning behind things, it starts to break down their ideology and starts to go after them. So fascists seek to make the vocabulary simplistic because it's better for them if people don't have complex and critical words to use, or critical ideas or complex ideas to use as a comparative. The people will not be able to challenge what's going on. And it keeps people subjected in a way. So a lot of the time, if you haven't noticed, fascism is authoritarian and always will be, because there has to be an upper and a lower. So now, with this in mind, there you can look at these anytime you want. I mean, it's all on the internet. So, with all this said, you now have some more ammunition for your own vocabulary, so that when somebody uses the term fascist, you can look at what they're saying the word fascist to, or who they're saying the word fascist to, and see if they're actually talking about somebody who's fascist or somebody that they just disagree with. As always, there are so many other forums and so many other resources out there to talk about these things. I just wanted to provide a little bit about this. So do your own research if you feel like you want some more, or if you're good with this, that's fine too. Just as long as you're better equipped to handle people who come at you and say you're a fascist, then you can know whether or not they know what they're talking about. So thank you for watching, and I hope to be doing more of these, and I hope you all enjoy these. And I hope everybody has a great day. Solidarity, everyone.